guys, welcome to my channel. I know my hair is wet, but I figured it would be okay to film with wet hair. Seeing as we're in the midst of this coronavirus stuff, I just thought I'd put out some content to maybe entertain some people while we're all trying to stay home. So this video is going to be about some books that I read several months ago actually, and when I was reading them, I knew that I wanted to do a video on, them, but then I was like, oh, it's a series, I'll do it after I read the series, and then like things came up and I didn't do it. So this won't be as detailed as a lot of my rant review kind of videos are, but I think it'll still be good to film, and hopefully it's still enjoyable to watch. So, with that being said, let's jump into reviewing Sarah J. Maas's series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. For starters, we have the first book in the series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Sorry, ACOTAR, as it's known in many circles. So first, let me read my initial Goodreads review of this book. I really enjoyed the story and the characters, but I had a couple issues with it. The pacing was definitely a little weird, with most of the book not having much action and then an exciting climax crammed into the end. And the riddle Feyre needed to solve, I figured out as soon as I read it. I know she's illiterate, but she's still clever. I thought she would have figured it out sooner. But these shortcomings weren't enough to make me not like the book, and I can't wait to read the rest of the series. That review was really funny to go back and read like months later when I've had time to sit on the story, and I definitely don't have, my memories of this book are not as fond as that review might lead one to believe. Actually, when I was working on kind of skimming through the books for like little things that I remembered and reading recaps on it, I really want to reread this series now. I'll probably hate myself if I do, but I want to. So some more issues that I had with this book are that Feyre, our main character, you know what, actually, let me kind of summarize this book for you. So Feyre, the world is split into like two regions. The fairies live in one region and the humans live in another region. Feyre is a human, and for some reason the humans hate fairies that live on the other side of this wall. Feyre ends up accidentally killing a fairy, and another fairy comes and takes her from her family to live with him in the fairy realm. And Feyre's family that she leaves is really awful. Her mother is dead, so it's just her father and two sisters. Her father doesn't really care about her. He's like completely indifferent. One of her sisters is like a raging bitch, honestly. She sucks. She's horrible. And the other sister just kind of like does whatever the crowd does. She's not a great character either. So Feyre goes to live with this fairy in this other realm, and the first half of the book is pretty much just a Beauty and the Beast retelling. That there's this spell that's fallen over the fairy court, and they have like masks stuck on their faces so that you can't see their true form, and Feyre needs to fall in love with the fairy that ended up kidnapping her. So another thing about the book that really bothered me was Feyre's human family is the worst. They're garbage. Not only are they just like poorly developed characters, they're really mean to Feyre. Like, they don't care about her at all, and she gives like everything for them. She like hunts to provide for them. She tries to make money to like give them income because something happened. Her father was like a merchant who fell on bad times, is from what I remember, so he's not really making any money. So I don't understand why Feyre is like whisked away to this like magical kingdom where she has everything she could ever want, and she's like, oh man, like trying to run away and get back to the family that hates her. It doesn't make any sense for her character. It just keeps bringing up like she promised her mother on her deathbed that she would take care of her family, and I don't think, and it never gets explored enough for me to understand why that's such a powerful motivator for her. So to me, that just doesn't make sense for her character. Also, the villain in this book really isn't introduced until like the last maybe third or even quarter of the book. The first like chunk of this book is like pretty slow pacing. Feyre just like kind of being miserable in this magical fairy palace. But anyway, at the end of this book, Feyre's like love interest gets kidnapped, and Feyre like goes to save him. And the villain who's kidnapped him, Amarantha, is like the worst villain of all time. She is just like a caricature of a villain. And for some reason, like really only to progress the plot, like the character motivations like don't make sense, they're just not there. The villain Amarantha sets up like 3 tasks that Feyre has to complete, I think just to get Tamlin back. Tamlin's the love interest's name. But the 3 tasks are so random and stupid. First of all, besides the 3 tasks that are done, Amarantha tells Feyre a riddle. Oh, I wish I bookmarked it. Let me see if I can find it real quick, the riddle. Okay, so this is the riddle that Amarantha, the villain, gives Feyre to solve. There are those who seek me a lifetime, but never we meet, and those I kiss, but who trample me beneath ungrateful feet. At times I seem to favor the clever and the fair, but I bless all those who are brave enough to dare. By large, my ministrations are soft-handed and sweet, but scorned, I become a difficult beast to defeat. For though each of my strikes lands a powerful blow, when I kill, I do it slow. So the thing is, if Feyre can solve that riddle, she doesn't have to do any of the other 3 tasks that Amarantha ends up assigning her. Her and Tamlin immediately get to go free. The answer to the riddle, I read it and like 2 seconds later was like, the answer to the riddle is love. Feyre, who the book has tried to play up as being like a fairly clever person, does not figure the riddle out until like a climactic moment at the end of the book. She's like, oh my god, it's love. Also, it doesn't make any sense to me that the villain makes the riddle like answer be love. She's a villain, and like a very cartoonishly bad villain. Anyway, I won't get into the other stupid tasks. They're stupid. That's all you need to know, really. I've got 3 other books to go over in this video as well. Another thing at the end of the book that didn't make a lot of sense to me, earlier in the book we're introduced to this character, Rhysand, and he is supposed to be like this villainous character, and the fairies have different courts, hence kind of the titles of these books, but Rhysand is a lord of another court, and Tamlin, Feyre's love interest, is a lord of a court as well. So we know Rhysand from earlier in the book. We know that he's kind of an unlikable guy. And Feyre runs into Rhysand when she's at this place with Amarantha and Tamlin and like a bunch of other like bad fairies and stuff. And Rhysand comes up with this really weird plan. So the tasks aren't like one after another. There's like a couple days or weeks or something in between all of them. And during that time, Amarantha is hosting like banquets and stuff for her court. So Rhysand does this like really strange thing where he makes Feyre dress like very provocatively, and then he also puts like makeup on, like he paints her skin so that if anyone were to like to touch her, it would like mark the paint. And let me read where he explains the motivation. The moment you break Amarantha's curse, this is Rhysand talking to Feyre, Tamlin's wrath will be so great that no force in the world will keep him from splattering her on the walls. Amarantha is also keeping the fairies from using their magic while they're in her like court. Why do you think I'm doing this? Rhysand asks. Because you're a monster. He laughed. True, but I'm also a pragmatist. I'm so sorry. Working Tamlin into a senseless fury is the best weapon we have against her. Seeing you enter into a fool's bargain with Amarantha was one thing. But when Tamlin saw my tattoo on your arm, oh, you should have been born with my abilities, if only to have felt the rage that seeped from him. Rhysand has also given Feyre a tattoo on her arm at this point, so it's like he's marked her. And all the fairies have like one particular power. Rhysand's is reading minds. Skipping down a bit. Feyre, for Cauldron's sake, I drug you, but you don't wonder why I never touch you beyond your waist or arms. It's the only claim I have to innocence, he said. The only thing that will make Tamlin think twice before entering into a battle with me that would cause a catastrophic loss of innocent life. It's the only way I can convince him I was on your side. Basically, Rhysand is pretty much Basically, Rhysand is exploiting Feyre to make Tamlin angry enough to kill Amarantha. But that motivation doesn't make sense because Amarantha has already like seized control of Tamlin's land, stolen Tamlin's magic, and she's already like playing with Tamlin's like girlfriend, Feyre. So it doesn't make sense for Rhysand to go out of his way to exploit Feyre to make Tamlin mad when there's already so many things to make him mad. Like, why is that necessary? Anyway, the book ends. Amarantha dies. Feyre goes back with Tamlin. That's it. We can go to the next one now. So the next book is A Court of Mist and Fury. I'll start off again reading my original Goodreads review. I thought it was an improvement from A Court of Thorns and Roses, but still not very well done. Mass left some plot lines unexplained while completely over-explaining some things that I didn't care about at all. I did think we got a much better grasp on her cast of characters in this book. I'm looking forward to seeing how the series wraps up, but it's not one of my favorites. This book, honestly, this is 600 pages long. I couldn't actually tell you the plot of this book really at all. I do know that, so at the beginning of the book, Feyre and Tamlin are having issues, and Feyre feels like Tamlin won't let her go, like he's trapped her in the palace and not letting her do what she wants, I think. And Rhysand and Feyre also made like a bargain in the last book where, was it like a week out of the year or something, Rhysand gets to take Feyre to his court, and Rhysand takes Feyre to his court like on the day that she's supposed to marry Tamlin. He like snatches her out of her wedding. And what ends up happening is Feyre realizes that Tamlin was controlling and didn't really love her for her, so she ends up falling in love with Rhysand, who is supposed to, I guess, have like a redemption arc in this book. Yeah. And then she like hangs out with Rhysand and his friends, his like found family. Anyway. So the dialogue in this book, the first book, let's just compare. A Court of Thorns and Roses is, a decent sized book. This is like average. And Court of Mist and Fury is thick. So this one had like minor world building. Pretty much everything that I had covered. The fairy and the human realms, magical powers, that was pretty much it in this book. So this book, Sarah J. Maas was trying to do more world building, definitely, but I think she did it really poorly. The world building in this book was mostly Feyre asking questions and having other fairies, other characters in the book answer her questions. It was a lot of telling and not a lot of showing, and also really irritating to just read this girl ask so many questions. Like there's better ways to do world building. Also, I don't understand how in the first book, Tamlin is built up as this like great guy. He and Feyre are so much in love. And like very quickly in this book, it's like Tamlin is the worst and we should like Rhysand. And it's like, okay, the first book was the complete polar opposite. Tamlin was like a great guy, a little bland, but fine. And Rhysand was like this really scummy dude who exploited Feyre and like used her. And in this book, you're supposed to love Rhysand. So that was a little difficult. Also, Sarah J. Maas in these books, what you end up finding out, I think it's in this. Yeah, it's in this one. You end up finding out that Feyre and Rhysand are mates, which is a concept that I don't think the book explored enough, because at first I thought that when she was talking about fairies being mates, it's like, oh, like, it's like the people that are a perfect match for each other. But then it's explained that, like, no, fairies that are mates sometimes are, like, really bad for each other. And sometimes being with your mate, like, sucks. So I don't understand what, like, magical algorithm decides who the fairies are mates with. Or why it exists. But anyway. Also, she never calls, like, the females, the women in this book are called women, and the males, men in this book are only called males. And I think it's her trying to be like, oh, the fairies, like, aren't human, so they don't get called, like, men. But again, the female characters get to get called women, so that doesn't make sense. I do know that one important thing brought up in this book is, kind of in the first book as well, but really heavily emphasized in this one, is that there is an all-powerful cauldron that was used to create the entire world in these books. So that's why the characters will say, like, by the cauldron, or like, oh my cauldron, instead of oh my god, because their god is the cauldron? I don't know if the cauldron is sentient, though. Anyway, so honestly, it's been too long, and I really rushed through these books, so I probably missed the finer plot points. But there, in the next book, there's going to be conflict over the cauldron. So the next book is A Court of Wings and Ruin. I think this is even bigger than the last book. It's ridiculous. So I will again read my original Goodreads review. This is probably the shortest review I've ever written. I wrote it, full disclosure, I finished this book, it was like 3 in the morning. I had had a few glasses of wine, and I really didn't like this book. I was really over the series, and my filter was gone. So the review that I wrote was, this is a YA fantasy novel about all-powerful cookware, a magic mirror, and vague World War II allegory. I could write a longer review, but this is one that I think is better left short. Something Mass's editor might have considered suggesting before publishing this 700-page novel. So that's that. To explain my points better, all-powerful cookware, I told you about the cauldron. In this book, they talk about it a lot. A lot of the conflict between the different, like, countries, I guess, in this book are over controlling the cauldron. Like, both sides want to get the cauldron, and it's just so hard to take seriously when you know that all these people are talking about wanting a pot so bad. I just couldn't get over it. Like, why did Sarah J. Maas have to choose a cauldron to be, like, such a big part? It was just so frustrating to read. There's a magic mirror. So for, like, the final battle, Feyre, I hope I'm paraphrasing this correctly, because, again, it's been a while since I read this. But at the final battle, there is a monster that Rhysand wants Feyre to convince to fight for them. I don't remember why it has to be Feyre, but anyway, so the monster will only fight on their side if Feyre can look into a mirror, and I think at first he won't let her or something. Anyway, so the magic mirror shows the person that's looking in it, like, who you truly are, and the description is so weird. So it's like Feyre doesn't look into the mirror and see herself. It's like she sees a monstrous version of herself because she's a flawed person. And the monster wants her to look into the mirror to know that she is self-aware enough to cope with herself, with all her flaws and imperfections. And because she doesn't go crazy when she's faced with that, he agrees to fight for them. that was another, it was just like a weird plot point that I didn't think made a lot of sense, and it was just like handled weirdly in the writing as well. In the vague World War II allegory, again, as I said, the world is split into the fairy realm and the human realm, and there's a wall that splits them. And as these two countries, so in this book there's a war that breaks out between the humans and the fairies on the other side of the wall. Feyre and Rhysand and her people are fighting with the human side. And the war is going badly for them until fairies from another country, you might call them the Americans, join the fight and turn the tide of the war. Also, something that makes it really weird about like the other, I don't remember, honestly I don't remember if they're humans or fairies, but who cares at this point. When they join the war, they're led by Feyre's father, who you might remember doesn't care about Feyre at all. But in this book, he like gives his life leading these troops to relieve Feyre and her like soldiers. And it's completely like out of character for him, and he's been gone for the last 2 books, so there was no like character arc for Feyre's father. It went from he's pretty much just neglectful to giving his life and somehow going to a foreign country and rallying the troops to come back and fight for his daughter. So that was weird. Also, so part of like there's like that found family dynamic. Rhysand has a bunch of friends that are really close to him, and they're like considered his and Feyre's family. And again, okay, we've read this much of the first 2 books, and we get to this part in the 3rd book, and Sarah J. Maas is like, you know what? We should throw in a little bisexual representation. And she writes like the worst coming out monologue of all time. I'm gonna start reading it. This is probably gonna be too long for it all to fit in the video. Okay. Honestly, what is this character's name? Morgan, okay. So Morgan, this is from Feyre's point of view. She led me up to the tree line at the border of both our camps, and I knew from that alone, ... I knew she was about to tell me something she didn't wish anyone overhearing, something worth delaying my meeting with Amren for a little while. She leaned against a towering oak, foot tap-tapping on the ground. No more lies between us. Guilt tugged on my gut. Yes, I said, I'm sorry about deceiving you. I just... I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. Moore rubbed her face. You were right about me, though. You were... Her hand shook as she lowered it. She gnawed on her lip, throat bobbing. Her eyes at last met mine, bright and fearful and anguished. Her voice broke as she said, I don't love Azriel. I remained perfectly still, listening. No, that's not true either. I do love him, as my family, and sometimes I wonder if it can be... more, but... I do not love him, not the way he feels for me. The last words were a trembling whisper. Have you ever loved him that way? No, she wrapped her arms around herself. No, I don't... You see... I'd never seen her at such a loss for words. She closed her eyes, fingers digging into her skin. I can't love him like that. Why? Because I prefer females. For a heartbeat, only silence rippled through me. But you sleep with males. You slept with Helion... And had looked terrible the next day, tortured and not at all sated. Not just because of Azriel, but... because it wasn't what she wanted. I do find pleasure in them, in both. Her hands were shaking, so fiercely that she gripped herself even tighter. But I've known, since I was little more than a child, that I prefer females, that I'm... attracted to them more over males, that I connect with them, care for them more on that soul-deep level. But at Hewn City... all they care about is breeding their bloodlines, making alliances through marriage. Someone like me... if I were to marry where my heart desired, there would be no offspring. My father's bloodline would have ended with me. I knew it. Knew that I could never tell them. Ever. People like me... we're reviled by them. Considered selfish for not being able to pass on the bloodline. So I've never breathed a word of it. And then... I'm sorry. It just goes on like that with a lot of ... And just... for pages. Pages of dots and this weird stilted conversation that I don't think really does anything to further bisexual representation in literature, because again, we've read the majority of the series without knowing that Morgan is bisexual. So really, why throw it in at all? But that's just me. Finally, we move to the last book in the series that's been published thus far, the novella, A Court of Frost and Starlight. Blissfully, this one is very short, but because it was so short, it was easy for me to write a highly detailed Goodreads review. So let's hit it. I knew going into this that I was really just reading it to see how bad it would be, and oh my god, in that way, it did not disappoint. First of all, this book has no plot. There is literally no reason for this book to exist, except maybe as an epilogue to A Court of Wings and Ruin, just to let readers know how characters are doing the following Christmas. But there's no conflict. Nothing gets resolved. There's some political unrest following the war in the last book, but everyone, including the High Lord and Lady of this province, the main characters, just sort of shrug it off. After all, it's the holidays. Too much of this story also focuses on Nesta and how she continues to be literally the worst person and flattest character of all time. So Nesta is one of Feyre's sisters. She's the one that I mentioned in the first book, who is just so mean to Feyre, and she hates fairies, and she's just so, I mean, again, her only character trait is being mean and angry all the time. I have no idea why Mass wrote her in the first place, let alone why she gets so much exposure in this blissfully short novella. Basically, this is just Mass writing fan fiction for her own story. She just wanted to publish the scene of Feyre and Rhysand having sex in the cabin and didn't have another way to do it. You would only care about this if you're a diehard fan of this series or if you want to rant about it. Other things that annoyed me include Feyre painting all the time, but none of her paintings are ever described. Based on Mass's descriptions of Feyre's paintings, she does a lot of abstract work. So in the past few books, Mass really tried to play up the fact that Feyre likes to paint, but never really describes what Feyre paints. So it's just a lot of I splashed colors across the canvas to express my anger. And it's like, what was she painting? It sounds like you're describing cubism. What is she painting? Just tell me. Rhysand is also so smug and annoying that I couldn't stand any scene with him in it. I don't remember him acting so insufferably in the original trilogy. Also, the book doesn't just flip between first-person point of view with some characters, it also does third-person with some characters. This was so hard to follow. I mean, the book ends. After this is bonus material, so the book is only 230 pages long. There's way too many perspective shifts to keep up with in such a short span. In any case, I can't wait for the next book to give me some garbage to get heated over. So it was also fun to do this video and kind of see how my feelings for the series changed over time. Like the first book, I was really hopeful. The second book, still hopeful. The third book, completely over it. And for the novella, just ready to watch the world burn. Do I know now if I would still read the next one? Ooh. Like I said, I kind of want to reread the series to see how I feel about it. Maybe pick up on the finer plot points that I missed. But anyway, that's my review of A Court of Thorns and Roses. If you like rant reviews like this, you should consider subscribing to my channel because these are some of my favorite videos to film. Catch you in the next video.